a fine array of people to talk with today about KPIs. They're up here. So Vania Agrey from Best Buy, Laura Bissmeyer from Corning, Deana Denton from Corning, and Debra Powers from Best Buy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'll sit now and we'll ask some questions. So KPIs. I want to start with the question for each of you, just talking a little bit about what you measure, how effective it is to measure. And I know you've got AP, you've got supply chain, and you've got IT represented up here. So we can go in any particular order, but just what are you measuring and how well is it working? And I will, before you start, I will say that having been in supply chain for a long time, we struggled with KPIs mightily for any number of reasons, and I'm happy to volunteer my failures as well as we go through this. So you go ahead.
And your successes?
The rare ones I have, yes, I'm happy to share those as well.
I'll start off. I'll defer to Laura on some of the traditional metrics in her space on cycle time and some of the stuff that we've been really deep in. And I think on the IT side, I've been challenging myself to think of the new metrics that are relevant in the digital world. Metrics around touchless, right? We have what degree of touch points do we take out of the process? You know, as we look through the Tradeshift process flow, everything from the supplier doing their own supplier survey and them actually capturing the keystrokes and getting us out of that tactical business of just data entry, right? To get that process considerably more touchless, and then jumping to the PL, how do I make the assignment, the coding, and all that stuff more touchless? And decrease the cycle time. And so my focus has really been on this metric around degree of touchless velocity, in these processes, because digitalization is empowering the humans to do much more with a lot less.
Okay, great.
So.
Yeah, I'm just trying to translate for her to the organization with the traditional KPIs, right? So, our finance organization, they want you to sign up at the time that you put the project in place. It's the right thing to do. Now you got to figure out how to prove that it's the right thing to do. And you've got to pick metrics that you can measure and influence. Sometimes the best metric is one that you can't measure, so you can't actually get to it that way. And so you have to find, what do they call those? Like stand-in, sort of?
Yeah. The
shadow metrics or something like that you can extrapolate to get to the metric that you really want to tell the story with. And it needs to be ones that you can get your organization to go along with you. So it's been a real challenge. I will tell you, one of the things that's been really helpful is making it visible. So we don't always get the KPIs right. We don't always have the most accurate data, right? Because if you go for perfect, you're never going to get there. But making them visible, we've had a big push for Power BI across the organization, and we've actually had really good user adoption. And with that has turned a lot of things visible. And by making it visible, you get a different discussion about the metrics, which has been really helpful for us.
Can I ask one more follow-up just of Corning? So I think my failures, if that's the right term for it, was aligning across organization and getting KPIs aligned. They don't kind of destroy the KPIs from another part of the organization. How well are you aligned, and both across each other and then within the Corning organization?
I think Laura and I are very much aligned. So we share these metrics. So when I talk about something like automating something, like how much of the heavy lift is a digital FTE picking up on our end-to-end process, right? So she and I challenge ourselves, because I tease her all the time. My second day on the job, she's like, oh, we're an SAP shop, but I want this to be touchless. I'm like, you bought SAP with 5,000 screens and 5 million keystrokes to do, and you want it to be touchless. So from day one, we've been trying to align of how do you get touchless when the technologies themselves invite people to do things, keystroke, right? So we've been sharing the metrics of saying, how do I get the digital agents, whether it's the AI, ADA, to do more of the heavy lift, to say, hey, last time you coded this, you coded it as some person put in 10 horsepower motor, they ended up in the Granger catalog, it was item 1, 2, 3, 4. How many keystrokes, how many people have to touch it such that the third time ADA picks up and nobody else in the organization is gonna keystroke that ever again? We're gonna really get, so I'm holding myself to be accountable for her cycle time, but I measure it as keystrokes and how much of the heavy lift and the interaction between the human and the computer that the computer is picking up.
Okay, interesting. Best Buy.
So I love metrics. I love to measure things. I find it from anywhere from just understanding what your volume is to, and it's month over month, year over year. It can be week over week, especially when we're in high volume season. It also shows me how my people are performing, or if there's something that's changed, and where do I and when do I need to go in and actually do some more root cause analysis. I also look at it from how are we paying our vendors? Are we paying them on time? And what's the root cause as to why we're not paying them on time? Anytime that we have a project, which every year we have loads of projects, we actually have to come up with benefits, and we have to be able to measure those benefits. So again, more metrics in order to really evaluate how well did this project go? Where are we at? Did we actually accomplish the benefits that we signed up for? Or are we tracking in that direction, or are we not? So I could go on and on about the metrics that I have, but again, they're very powerful. They really have some real purpose, at least in a processing environment. They definitely have a.
And same question, Vania, for you and Debra. How about alignment within the organization? How well aligned or not well aligned do you find them?
So I'll probably get myself in trouble with this, but she already knows.
No one's going to hear. No one's going to hear any of this outside of this room.
I am not a fan of metrics. Numbers don't do anything for me. I'm more of the process person. Tell me what your metrics say, Debra, and I'll fix it. Tell me what isn't working, what is working, what can we do better. And I'm the person that's going to work with the people that I support to say, here's what Debra's numbers are showing here. Here's where she wants us to get. What do we need to do to get there? So we're in constant conversation along with Amy, who I directly report to, on what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do to make it work. We try something that doesn't work, you try it again. That doesn't work, you try it again. You're changing your SOPs every day until you find that fit that makes it work, and that you see those numbers changing and you see the positive things that are happening because of how we're using Tradeshift and how we're coaching our business partners to use Tradeshift.
So just one. So I'm now starting to coach my managers on how to utilize metrics. I know this one will be a challenge, but I'll get there.
When are you retiring?
I think I share Vania's her sentiments, because I think in a digital world, you really have to challenge your thinking. The metrics that made Hilton successful and Marriott successful are not the metrics around assets on the books that made Airbnb successful, VRBO successful. So you really have to be willing to disrupt and say, what are the metrics that are going to make me successful in the new digital age? And so I think you have to be very careful, because Laura and I have been struggling with some of the metrics from finance to say something like, 100% compliance on the default currency. Well, maybe the default currency is not the currency that I want, because that currency is going the wrong way. And AI is superimposing and suggesting that I go look at those open POs and I go change the currency, proactive of an FX issue, right? So you got to really challenge the existing scripted KPIs and the traditional KPIs when we live in a world where it's a completely new balance sheet, digital balance sheet.
That's really interesting. And to combine something I heard from the Best Buy folks, how are as you're changing your KPIs and as they're evolving, are the processes that deliver that changing in concert, or are they disconnected? How do you feel about KPIs new, processes are the old processes? Or are they working in lockstep?
For us, it's working consistently because we're always evolving.
Yep.
We are never the same. What we did last year isn't necessarily what we're going to do this year. So those metrics are always evolving. And there are some key metrics like the cost per invoice and that. Those are ones that definitely we are always looking at on a month-to-month basis, because that's really telling us what's the cost of the AP team to process an invoice. But no, it's evolving constantly.
And she challenges us. So you might have a KPI that she's set for you, or metrics that she wants you to meet, and you standardly meet them and or exceed them. So she'll pull us into a meeting and say, Vania, you're meeting these, you're exceeding these, let's shrink them down. And of course I go, What happens when I don't meet them then? Because you're giving me a shorter time span, but you always figure out how to make it work. And again, like I said, you're working with the people that you support, you're working with your business partners to meet those. Because me as a manager, I want to meet her expectations, so I'm going to switch things around, coach the people that I support, and make sure we meet those KPIs and the metrics that she creates
So
for
these
us.
metrics are really around meeting our customers' expectations, being not only industry standard, but going above and beyond that. So you have contract agreements that say you need to respond within this time frame. Well, from my perspective, we have to be at least at industry standard, if not better. And I applaud my team because they're better. So, but that also gives me an opportunity is if our company has some financial issues and we have to start cutting SG&A, I have the flexibility to be able to adjust that.
Yep.
Can you distinguish in either group for me the difference between digitization is helping you measure better versus digitization is changing the metric completely? And is there both of that going on simultaneously in your
Yes.
organizations? And maybe could you just describe that a little bit?
So for us at Corning, I know that, it's a couple of things. One, we're very PEX heavy, process excellence or Six Sigma heavy, right? We had a big push in the 80s. We've been around a long time. Everybody really embraced it. It was a top-down, bottom-up led. So it's really instilled. So that's an incremental improvement, right? You've got your define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So that's all about that incremental metric step. And as digital capabilities come in, they play a part in how you can do that. Innovation is different. Because innovation, I think, is when you're focusing on the outcome and not necessarily exactly how you get to that outcome in the past, right? It's about how can you get to that outcome now, given what you've got available to you. In that process could look extremely different than the process that you had in place before.
Yep.
To your point, Debra, you're always evolving, right? You're always doing things differently. So similarly for us in Corning is that if we're approaching it with DMAIC or design, it sits kind of in that incremental bucket and we'll rely on those standard KPIs. And we are challenging ourselves now as we look at doing things completely differently. Like we were talking with the touchless transaction, that's our big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Is to get to touchless transactions. How do you measure that? And how do you report on it in such a way that your organization can understand? And the way that you get there is going to be very different than digitizing your analog processes.
Yep, absolutely agree with what you said.
Yeah, let me piggyback on Laura's comment there because we certainly see some of the metrics will be sustained. So you're definitely going to still want to measure a three-way match, how accurate and how timely was your three-way match. That's going to be sustained. But something like lag time for, supplier affirmation, like that metric has been totally disruptive. I shouldn't have to done suppliers because I sent you a PO out in space and I'm just waiting on you to say, yeah, I got it, and all 4 are going to be delivered on Friday. That's gone in a real-time connected digital marketplace, right? Because you commit it real-time, it's digital collaboration. So that metric is disrupted, right? It's just like there's no more metric on your car about what are the, what steps did you do every 3,000 miles oil change. If you got a Tesla, you don't have oil to change anymore. So there are certainly metrics that are disrupted and no longer relevant, obsolete in a digitally connected, adaptive world. But then there are some of the traditional ones like three-way match where, we're going to match everything and we want that to have a much lower level of error and human touch in the numbers.
But like cost, how do you get to cost in the new world, right? Because when I'm in process of implementing something innovative, I don't know, I can estimate, I can get a guess on about my cost, but my guess isn't going to be as good as it is in the incremental world. So I've got to have more room for error and I've got to have more tolerance from the organization that directionally we're going the right way. I might not get the number exactly where I thought I was going to get the number, but I believe in total from a directional standpoint, I'm going to head us in the right direction. That's a really hard sell, depending on the economics of the year and where the company is and where your business is or where your function is, can be really challenging to have those discussions because people, when they get under stress and duress, they pull back and go back to what they know.
And Laura, so in that sense, can you talk a little bit about how much leeway you are getting? I mean, innovation is going to require some risks, and there's going to be some wins and some failures potentially. So for anybody on the panel here, how much leeway are you getting to innovate and with the knowledge that you may fail sometimes?
I still have
That's
a
a
job,
tough
but
one.
every day
Yeah.
I wonder.
I think we have a lot of flexibility at Best Buy. It's okay to fail. I mean, we're human. We're going to make bad assumptions, but we need to learn from those and move forward with that. So we go into a lot of projects that now we've actually said it's about running the business. If we're going to run the business more effectively and efficiently, we need this going forward. So that actually goes in under a category of we're running the business.
The leadership that I work for is really encourages us to challenge the status quo, think outside of the box, and then think outside of the box So I've been very lucky that I work for a leadership team that wild and crazy is okay. The crazier it is, sometimes the better it is. And that, like she said, it's okay to fail. I think it makes you smarter. As long as you learn from that failure and where did you go wrong and what could you have done different. So I think failing for me or for us at Best Buy is a sign that you're trying and you're trying to make those changes and you're willing to change, which is in this world is very important, and to be able to do it quickly.
Is that a function of a leader, or is that a function of the culture within Best Buy?
I've worked for Debra for
It's a trick question.
10 years, maybe more than 10 years. I've worked with some leaders that don't let you challenge the status quo, don't let you tell them that I think you're wrong or I think we could do this better. She really expects us to challenge her and push her buttons.
A big thing right now with Best Buy is that we are challenging the status quo. We are challenging, we're looking at artificial intelligence, the robotics, the new tools that can make us better and faster and really get to that end customer. So they've actually started with how to change, how to evolve, and we've actually gone through some trainings, and it's really hairball ideas. It's like there's no budget, we have IT support, just go outside the box. And so we've literally done that with all the way down to the store level people to just be creative, just think, and then we submit them in to a team and they're evaluating them, and we ourselves are challenged to say, hey, if you think there's something you can do within your own team, do it. Start it and get it done.
Yeah. I think with an IT mindset, I look at that question a little differently. I think it's a safe space in our innovation pipeline to fail, and we've set that expectation. That's the only way we can learn. But when we take big risk and we lean in and we trust technologies, I think I probably spent a little bit more time shaping the talk track to say, we've evolved our thinking. There's been a lot of disruption in the space. We're happy to re-partner with someone who's excelling in the space. You got to be very careful because there's an engine out there, and I'll call it a couple of big ERPs, and they're like, see, you should have never left me. You should have never done that. Right, so I have to be very careful on my talk track, right, when something fails or we have to evolve and pivot, right?
And I would say that as you get closer to manufacturing, the type of failure and the level of failure and the ability for people to absorb it and accept it changes.
I would guess so.
Right?
I
So
would
like,
guess so.
if you fail at something that can be fixed in a day, you can probably get away with it.
Yeah.
But if you fail something that takes you 3 months to recover from, yeah, it's going to be tough in Corning, right? If you're next to manufacturing. Now, if you're in the innovation space, you're going to have a lot more room because you're early stage. There's a lot of support and nets underneath you to help with that. And one of the things I think we've been challenged with is I was brought over from the innovation space into the procurement space. I was recruited out of innovation because our boss, Cheryl Capps, has a vision for a real transformation, and she wants to take the innovation processes and tools that we have around product and technology and apply them in the business process space. So now we're trying to teach what we call, green and blue Herman brain dominance organization, which is kind of analytical, straight line, metric based, to think in the yellow-red vision, creative, human-based space. And that transition takes a long time. It's more than just a class, right? You're really getting people to think, don't build the waterfall project. Let the orchestra play the music in an improv jazz way and let the characters tell you their story.
Interesting.
And that's very challenging for people who want to write down what is the objective, and I'm going to aim for that objective. But what if you could get better than the objective if you didn't define the objective there? Right? And that is really
that's
challenging, right?
You can tell she gets me into a lot of trouble.
Of which you're always able to walk yourself out of. So.
I've got like 5 other tracks I want to take this conversation down and watch the clock, so I'm going to pick and choose. So here's another thing I'd be interested in your comments on. So how much is innovation from new players in your industry redefining what you're focused on and what you're driving toward from a metric perspective? Are there new types of competitors that didn't exist in the past that are driving change within your organization?
For us, I don't know that I'd necessarily say that it's new competitors. I think we're challenging ourselves to be better and to really serve that end customer and be that partner that really educates them, has the product that they need, and make sure that we source it. So I think we challenge ourselves.
Okay.
In Corning, and Deana always reminds me, right? You have to disrupt yourself. And the reason that that's so important, and feel free to chime in, is because most people, if you look out there, they're getting disrupted not by their competitors, not by the people that they were monitoring and watching. They were getting disrupted by the people who are coming totally from the left side that you had no idea was going to enter into the market and compete in a completely different way than you thought about. So if you're not disrupting yourself, you're at risk for that disruption to hit you from the side. You've got to be the one challenging and trying to come from the side. And it's really hard, right? It's not easy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. I definitely see new capabilities that we didn't need to have. We had a comfort zone that we could get back to a customer a few days later, a few weeks later, but not now. The supply chain is real time and connected, and people have gotten into a sense of entitlement to say, where is my stuff? How is my stuff? Who has it? And exactly how many minutes will it be in front of my door? So the game has really changed, so we have to partner with people for capabilities that we never even thought we would need in a more B2B focused organization.
This is a bit of a supply chain specific question, so Laura, maybe we'll start with you. There's a lot of talk around how do you leverage control towers to manage key KPIs and change the nature of work within supply chain. HBR did an article last year around the death of supply chain management. So how is the nature of work within a supply chain changing, and is the notion of control towers an example of something you guys are migrating toward within Corning?
So we actually are migrating towards them.
Okay.
But the pendulum swings, right? And we've been around long enough that you just watch it swing from one side to the other within the company. And you learn things on either side of the arc that you're going to incorporate and keep in your tool chest to use as you swing through again. From a supply chain standpoint, I think supply chains are getting more attention now because all the costs that we could get out of manufacturing, we got out. Right? And now you've got to look to the business processes. And there's a lot of, at least in Corning, right, there's a lot of slop in that space because we have 115 different manufacturing locations. Everyone with the absolute best of intentions was out there trying to get supply in when that plant needed it, move the product through the manufacturing process and get that product out to the customer when the customer wanted it, right? I mean, and so they're working really hard at that without impacting that manufacturing cost in that box. And what they ended up doing was building a lot of non-value added work steps in this space. but with this really strong sense of ownership because they created it, they built it, that's their spreadsheet with 1 million lines, right? And they don't care that that spreadsheet doesn't talk to the spreadsheet for the 18-month forecast when they own the 3-month forecast because they built it. I mean, it's not that they don't care, but they don't see the value of having that be a single digital thread.
Okay.
Right? And there's a huge opportunity in this space still, at least for us, to really fix the supply chain and get value out of fixing that supply chain.
Question for all of you, and it relates a little to that, is as your organizations are changing and the metrics are changing, is there a upskilling or retraining that goes on within the organization that needs to happen? And if so, how challenging is that for you guys in your organizations?
I'll start with that if that's okay. I would say that's been one of the biggest challenges for us at Best Buy. When you have an organization that's 15,000 people, retail, corporation, warehouses, to understand who codes invoices, who approves invoices, who understanding how many different processes I mean, you sit here and you think, well, I just need to get the invoice, somebody needs to code it, somebody needs to approve it. Well, when you start meeting with your business partners, when you understand who your business partners are, which is the first challenge, is understanding what their processes are, being kind and listening to them and not saying, well, that's not the way you're supposed to do it, or that's not the SLA, or that's not the SOP, and understanding how they've come with a spreadsheet that works for them, but to convince them that they have to move to a different process, and to also try to encourage them or get them to buy in, and that it's partially their idea to move to this new process, because you can't force anybody to do. You can force people to do, but they're not going to do it right, and they're not going to do it when they're supposed to.
It's not Debra's style to do that.
So,
you know that.
yeah. So I think
that's my
the
problem.
hard part with communicating to a large organization when you're making a big change like this and you don't really know who your players are has been very difficult for Best Buy. But we've persevered. I think we've done a lot of training. We've done a lot of retraining. We've worked with all of our business partners. We're open, we're honest, and coach them through what's going wrong. But I think the biggest thing is knowing who your business partners are and what piece of the puzzle your business partners for.
I think it's very important that you have your connected business partners. You know usually who your core business partners are, and you continually partner with them so that when you're making changes, they're already bought into that change and they're walking down that path with you. It's a much easier path to go if you have those strong partnerships with procurement. For us, it's procurement, tax, controllership. They really help us leverage that change or that going down a completely different path. And we're there for them too. So when they're doing something, we're there. So that partnership and knowing who they are, and that's for the non-merch. For the merch side, I mean, it's logistics, it's the merchandise team. I mean, you have a total different team, but it's getting their buy-in. It's partnering with them and supporting them when they need it, and they support you when you need it.
Yeah, on the IT side, the digital upskilling is my number one thing that I lose sleep over, because you know, historically in IT, people get to know one app really well and they go deep in one app. But I think tomorrow we need people who can take a procurement process across 4 or 5 apps and maybe even 5 microservices before you really get to the end-to-end. And you got to get people comfortable with, you know, let's say starting in a Beeline, then hopping over to Tradeshift and ended up in SAP, EAP, and they're like, what? You know, having heart attacks, because I really need them to understand the full end-to-end process. And that is a disruptor. It makes people feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I do believe that, honestly, Deana, believe that getting buy-in from your partners is important. But at some point you have to cry uncle, and you just have to get some thick skin and push forward and ignore it. Yeah. You can get away, I hate to say it, but it can be a strategy, right? If you have the credibility within your organization, if you perform in your rest of your day job, and you have the support of your manager, your supervisor, even if it's not 100% support, but she knows you get stuff done, You just have to plow forward, right? You have to be the bulldozer and recognize that some of that cleanup's going to happen after you get through there. But that's the only way you're going to get the leapfrog. Yep. Because otherwise, you're going to be working on the incremental, because that's as far as people can get.
Laura, you ended right at 000 on the clock. So I think on that note, I think you guys were amazing. That was a really great, we could have talked for another hour on this topic, but I think everybody would like to get a cold beverage. And so thank you very much. That was amazing.
Thank you.